This video contains references to abuse of the sexual, physical, and emotional nature, and bigotry including the likes of racism, xenophobia, and transphobia. If any or all of these subjects trigger you, or you are simply not comfortable with these subjects, I would highly recommend not watching the video any further. To everybody else, I hope you enjoy. For the past little while, in between uploading sessions of the low-key cursed Lords of Chaos video, I've been listening to a lot of the Smiths for my upcoming Smiths retrospective, which should come out one of these days after I move house and I'm able to film and be on camera. And in my life of listening to music, there have been two undeniable truths, and they are 1, Van Halen, not Van Hagar, and 2, Morrissey is a piece of Yet this has never deterred me from listening to the Smiths, and even some of Morrissey's solo work. And I don't try and moralize it as if I like the Smiths despite Morrissey or I'm just a huge Johnny Marr fan. I genuinely love his voice, lyrics, and his overall vibe, and what he brought to the band. I mean, look at him, he shoved a tree in his back pocket. He was a mad lad. He was very punk rock in many ways, and he was a rejection of the rock and roll mystique. Though I always have to caveat a recommendation of the Smiths to any acquaintances because even though Morrissey has grown into an opinionated, pretentious, and bigoted windbag, I still feel his output can be very rewarding for those who want to dig through it. Which got me thinking about the idea of separating art from the artist. It's always been weird to me as it seems to only apply to people in the spotlight, whereas the executives and higher-ups in Hollywood and big entertainment companies are indisputably awful for several reasons, yet millions, including myself, still use Spotify, Netflix, Stan, Disney Plus, and the like every month without any real hesitation. But at the same time, it's far easier to avoid supporting specific actors or musicians than the entirety of conventional entertainment. Sure, you could spend the rest of your life only watching indie flicks by non-problematic art school hipsters, but how are you going to watch said indie flicks without a TV or computer made with slave labor? Remember kids, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Just live in a cave and scavenge for food like a true comrade. But my point is, unless you want to pirate, which a lot of people can't even do due to their internet providers having a tantrum and threatening to cut off their service, you're always going to end up supporting evil people in the process, whether you want to or not. But there's still the option for harm reduction. Even doing what you can to support non-problematic artists and not supporting awful people is something to consider. It's often what people do in political elections when they don't like either candidate, and it makes more sense than just abstaining from voting in most cases, especially if said election has big repercussions for those less fortunate than yourself. There's an argument that you owe it to those people to vote for those most at risk. Another thing I've heard people say is that they refuse to support problematic artists just for their own sake, mainly. I remember my sister telling me that she can no longer listen to Marilyn Manson after being a fan for many years after he got outed for being a fucking psycho. I remember telling her to just pirate his stuff if she felt bad about it, but she couldn't even do that. She didn't feel right listening to his stuff at all because she said if she was even listening to him like that, then if someone asked her what she's listening to and she says Marilyn Manson, that's free promo for him. Sure, that might be a bit of a stretch to call that promotion, if it ever happens at all, but she just doesn't want to do it, and that's fair. Especially in a case where someone gets quote-unquote cancelled for something like transphobia, like J.K. Rowling was. And if a trans fan of Harry Potter can no longer support the franchise, that is totally understandable. Sure, the money that goes to her after buying Lego Harry Potter the video game wouldn't exactly make it or break it, and after J.K. outed herself, it got a lot of people to reevaluate her work, and hell, I don't know how she got away with as much BS as she did. She made the bankers small goblins with huge noses, she named one of the few black characters Kingsley Shacklebolt, named the only Asian character Cho Chang, which is just oriental sounding gobbledygook, and she named one of the only Irish characters Seamus Finnegan, who won't stop blowing up. And it doesn't even just happen once, it's a series long running gag. And I can keep going. Seriously, I've been rewatching the films with my buddies recently, and some things I have noticed have just plain and simply not aged well. But I can't lie, I still enjoy most of the movies. I mean, Chamber of Secrets is kinda mid, but that's besides the point. But at the same time, I'm not trans, black, Asian, or even Irish. Maybe if there was an insensitively named Slavic character, I too could be offended by just kidding raffle. Throughout my life of consciously consuming my entertainment, I've never really been confronted with someone I admired turning out to be a terrible person. By pure coincidence, ignorance, or everyone I loved was pretty much clean. Or they have been like Gene Simmons where I've been always knowledgeable of their BS. But last year, 3 musicians I greatly respected, one by one, turned out to be utterly reprehensible. The first of which was James Alex, the driving force behind the band Beach Slang, who after releasing my favorite album of 2020, was found out to be emotionally abusive to his manager Charlie Lowe. Via Twitter, she had this to say about Alex. Again, I'd like to give a warning because she does not hold back in what she says about her experience, and I would not feel right editing her words. I endured constant emotional, psychological, and narcissistic abuse from James Alex for years. I have learned that he sells his too kind to be true persona to hide that he is truly the most selfish and horrible person I have ever met. I was diagnosed with PTSD from how he treated me, so basically, fuck him. Fuck his made-up music personality, fuck his fake kindness, fuck him for using me almost daily, fuck him for making me want to commit suicide to get out, fuck him for my therapy bills and medication, fuck him for alienating me from everyone I love, fuck him for using me as a goddamn personal servant on tour and not, and making sure I was always so financially fucked with no other options, for being a textbook narcissist abuser, for making me feel so worthless and alone. I see you clearly now. Fuck you. You know what? I'm not done. Fuck him for punching holes through things because he was sick of me crying by his own hand. Fuck him for calling me an ungrateful bitch when I said I want to see my friends. For telling me I would have nothing without him. For telling me I would have no friends without him. Fuck him for literally saying to me that treating me badly made him feel like a rock star. I spent years of my life being consumed with fear and anxiety. Fuck you. This was a complete shock to me because James Alex portrayed himself as just a really cool and down-to-earth guy who wrote songs about his struggles for others to find solace in. He wore his influences of bands like The Replacements, Jawbreaker, and their Pixies on his sleeve, and he was a fan of music like the rest of us. He had a mantra of how music can bring people together, so it's really disappointing to think it was all, or at least mostly, was a front. But if there's one thing I have learned in my time, it's that abusers are really good at getting other people to like them. They're great actors. It really is part of the abusive cycle, where you treat maybe only one or a few people truly terribly, but everyone else thinks you're a stand-up guy. It's another way to make the abused feel small and worthless. And it worked. I mean, I thought he was a chill dude. He even retweeted me once. And I won't lie, I still listen to his stuff. I bought a shirt before I found out, but even now I still wear it for no other reason than I like how it looks. I even bought 2 Beatslang albums recently on vinyl. Mainly because they were dirt cheap, likely because the store is trying to get rid of old inventory. And look at them, they not only have a gatefold, one of them has a beautiful blue color, and they come with CD-like booklets the size of a conventional record. It's pretty great. None of the other records I bought recently have this many cool inclusions, even though I paid significantly less for these. But I'd be lying if I said it doesn't affect me at all listening to his music still. It places everything under a very uncomfortable looking glass, thinking about the supposed sincerity of many lyrics and how Alex was as an actual person. Though I still think songs like Dirty Cigarettes, Spin the Dial, and Tommy in the 80s are great songs. I don't think that makes me a bad person to say that. Just because he may not have been sincere, there's no reason for me to not be able to connect with it. Then there was, to put it very mildly, curious case of Megadeth bassist Dave Ellefson, who had, let's say, private videos of him having fun to the disgust and ridicule of many. Though things quickly became sinister when accusations of child grooming were made public because of a relationship he had with a teenage girl. How very Christian of him. But to give Dave some benefit of the doubt, at the time their relationship became sexual, she was of legal age, but barely. She was 19 when this became public, she was 17 when they developed a quote-unquote friendship, and she was 18 when things became sexual. Now you may be thinking, oh well, she was of age, she was 18, it's legal. Well, it's not really that simple. Let's give Dave a chance here and say that nothing explicit happened until 18 rotations around the sun had commenced from her birth until his dick got hard for her. Which, for the record, I have a hard time believing, but that's besides the point. The most charitable interpretation of the situation involves a rich and famous musician in his mid-50s who is a practicing Christian with a wife and several kids, randomly striking up a friendship with a girl who lives on the other side of the world in Instagram DMs, sending messages back and forth for a year until she is of legal age, and then letting the relationship get sexual, and then send dick pics, videos of him cranking his hog, and even wanting to make plans to meet this young girl in person to fuck her. It's wrong on so many levels, but before I divulge any further, I'll relay at least part of her statements that I've been able to find. Only scraps are still available and around to find since many of the posts Dave made during this time have been deleted. I'll let you make of that fact as you will. These video calls happened, but I was the one who started them, and I was never a minor. I was always consenting adults. Nothing inappropriate happened before that. It was all consensual. I'm not a victim, and I was not harassed in the slightest because I was the one who initiated it. So ignoring the fact that her statement has Stockholm Syndrome written all over it, sure, let's say it was consensual, and that she initiated it. She was a huge Megadeth fan, starstruck to talk to a musician she greatly admired, and she wasn't even 20 yet. Dave had all the power in that situation, and he should have had the common fucking sense to not let it get that far, or even reply to begin with if this is what can come of it. The whole concept of power imbalances between musicians and fans is why the idea of groupies is looked down upon in this day and age. Power and control are huge factors in cases of abuse. This girl may have thought that she was the one to initiate the relationship to become sexual, but it's far more likely that she was manipulated into even wanting it to begin in the first place. I mean, think about it. Why else would a man in his 50s keep and maintain a relationship with a teenage fangirl for a year? Nothing against her as a person, but there's millions of Megadeth fans like her. What makes her so special? He was then fired from Megadeth, which is one of few things I'll praise Mustaine for, but I'm aware it's likely more due to the fact that the actions of one band member is largely representative of an entire group. Whether you disagree with that is irrelevant. That's how it is. It's bad PR the band doesn't need. Do you really think Dave Mustaine wants to answer questions about his degenerate bass player during press for the new record whenever it comes out? People are quick to talk about cancel culture or Mustaine bowing down to the dreaded PC mob, but it's Dave Mustaine. He's fired people for much less. Jeff Young was fired in 1989 after there was just suspicion of his girlfriend cheating on him with Young. Do you really think he'll let a groomer stay in the band? Let's be real. The last one I remember happening in 2021 was Ken Stringfellow of the Posies. Now I know that they're very much a cult band, but if you're in the know, you might be aware of them, and I've heard their song Dream All Day, which was decently popular, crawling up the top 5 in the alternative charts. Ringo Starr covered one of their songs, and both Stringfellow and founding member / singer-songwriter John Auer joined Big Star for their reunion tours and album In Space in 2005. Stringfellow was even a touring member of REM for a number of years, and played on a couple of their records, and he also sang with Mark Ramone's Blitzkrieg. All around, he seems like a cool, quirky dude. He was soft-spoken, had a pretty singing voice, and the stage presence of a wilting flower. But in late October of last year, several women came out and accused Stringfellow of being chauvinistic and misogynistic at the best of times, and an abuser and rapist who had a habit of biting women during sex without permission. His ex-wife, Kim Warnick of the band The Fastbacks, said, "He never put a hand on me, but at the end of the day, it was horrible. What I had to deal with because of all his infidelities. Never ever marry a man for his voice." Leslie Hatton said that she was made to feel like a sexual conquest more than a person after they hooked up. On the same day they had sex, the manager of the Posies said that Stringfellow's status as the quote, biggest slut in rock and roll was in jeopardy since he'd only screwed 19 girls that year, to which Ken responded by saying, "No, today makes 20. While on tour in 2015, he very violently forced himself upon Christine Chambers in a men's restroom, and I mean extremely violent. I'm not even comfortable enough to describe the specifics. What makes the situation even worse is that Chambers told Stringfellow during the altercation that she was on doctor's orders to refrain from having sex, to which he responded by saying, "I know," only to continue. He later drunkenly blamed his musical collaborator and semi-girlfriend he was on tour with, Holly Nixon, for him doing what he did because he, quote, couldn't find her. Holly Nixon also said that during their relationship that she became pregnant and was pressured by Stringfellow to have an abortion, and he both paid for the operation and said that they could be together after she had it. Later, during Nixon's several attempts to end their relationship, he would frequently harass her over the phone and email, and at one point he even claimed he would kill himself if she didn't respond. And in 2018, a fan of the Posies, Christy Huock, said that after having an affair with Stringfellow, she woke up at 4 a.m. to him forcibly having anal sex with her. After these allegations became public knowledge, John Auer, Stringfellow's musical confidant since the mid-80s in the Posies, immediately left the band after talking with Christine Chambers, a good friend of his, for over 9 hours over the course of a couple of days. Stringfellow tried to clear the air with the help of his current wife of all people, trying to rebuke the claims, but if your own bandmates of 35 years decides to part ways with you, I think it's more than safe to say who's in the wrong here. And as a fan of the Posies and formerly of Ken Stringfellow, it's quite conflicting. On one side, I could easily say, fuck this band. Hell, John Auer did pretty much that, and he was in that band. Good on you, John. But unlike Megadeth, where Mustaine was always been the driving force, and Ellefson was, in my opinion, the weakest link in both classical lineups, despite also being a fantastic musician, he doesn't really make or break the band. He didn't even write the iconic P-Cells bass line. I'm not kidding. But with the Posies, Ken Stringfellow and John Auer were both lead singers and primary songwriters for the band. And even though Auer was responsible for, or at least sang, most of their bigger songs, I can't lie, most of Stringfellow's deep cuts were often my favorite tracks on their records. Their song Any Other Way from the album Dear 23 is honestly one of my favorite songs ever. like at least top 10. And like with beach slang, I can still connect with it, along with songs like You Avoid Parties, Please Return It, and Solar Sister. But just like with James Alex, it puts Ken Stringfellow's work under a looking glass, and he as a protagonist in these songs that I love has been sullied somewhat. But fuck him, I'm not gonna let him ruin it for me. They're a band I mainly listen to on Spotify, and they're not exactly getting much money from that to begin with. And also, I see it as a disservice to John Hour's contributions in songwriting to just swear them off completely. I mean, Suddenly Mary is a banger. And that sentiment can go for a lot of bands. A lot of the time, the non-problematic members of bands can get screwed through no fault of their own. I mean, John Hour just lost the Posies, the band he's given decades of his life to and attained a cult following with. Obviously, other members of bands like the Posies, such as Hour, are not the victims in these situations. It's the women who are abused. No one is denying that. But I can't help but also feel bad for the other bandmates who too have to go down with the ship after some piece of garbage set it ablaze. At the end of the day, I guess I can say that I can separate the art from the artist in most cases, but there's caveats to it. Sometimes my perception of the art can be changed, some songs I may grow to dislike, and sometimes I just have to put the artist themselves completely out of mind whilst listening. Maybe the only case where I probably can't separate the art from the artist is Ted Nugent, mainly because of this, and this. Truth be told, I have never been particularly too impressed by a Nugent song, but who knows, maybe I would be a fan if he wasn't a pedo-racist. I asked my subscribers on my community tab how they feel about separating art from the artist, and in the poll, the It Depends option won, which surprised me since my audience is made up of metalheads and punk fans, genres known for celebrating, well, degeneracy. I assumed they would be quick to forget about the problematic natures of their faves, but I guess it's more conflicting than I originally thought. I also got a lot of really great comments on that post of people explaining why they feel the way they do. Seriously, you guys are awesome. So my scientific discovery when it comes to this topic is it totally comes down to the person and their relationship with music/entertainment. It's as subjective as music is itself. It depends on their worldview, personality, and their lived experiences. So don't judge someone for being able to or not being able to separate the art from the artist. It's incredibly personal. If someone wants to play that new Harry Potter game when it comes out, let them. We're currently 2 years into a pandemic, and I sure as hell am not going to judge someone for wanting to unwind with a nerdy-ass video game about wizards and magic. But at the same time, don't get triggered over someone not wanting to support someone like J.K. Rowling. Yeah, most people understand that Joanne sees very little of that $60 you spend, but it's more so for themselves why they do it. They just can't feel comfortable with supporting some people after they've been outed for doing awful things. And that's totally fine. If you can no longer enjoy your entertainment without feeling dirty for it, then by all means, do something else with your time. We get such little time for ourselves that you owe it to yourself to make the most of it, however you want to do it. So just do what you want and try not to be a dick about it. Take it easy, party people.